Hi everyone, this is Arthi from Human Chapters. A very happy International Women's Day to all the women around the globe. I'll tell you a little bit about Human Chapters. Humans are living narratives with a past, present, and future. These narratives constitute of a number of chapters across a lifespan. The aim of these conversations is to highlight a chapter of the narrative and unpack its connections to other chapters. I don't care whether people are natural storytellers, but I truly do believe each one of us has a story to share. An acknowledgement to country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which now comprises Greater Shepparton. We pay respect to their tribal elders past and present and emerging. We celebrate their continuing culture and we acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. Today we're talking to Stephanie, and Stephanie lives in Ohio. Her chapter is going to be about her current professional journey. On to you, Stephanie. Give us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I was taken aback at first and really flummoxed about what on the earth I had that would be at all interesting to share with anyone. And then I thought for a bit, and I thought about the chapter that I'm in right now in my life professionally and what I've been experiencing and going through in the last couple of years. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to reflect on that, because I just would have, I think, kept going and going and going and not really recognized or thought much about those things. So what I'm doing now is I am supporting teachers in a variety of ways. I work part-time as an assistant professor, and I support teachers to be better reading instructors in a variety of ways. The other part-time of my work is divided in a couple of different activities. I support school districts and state departments of education, nonprofit entities in a variety of contract work, mostly around writing tools and guidebooks and things that will support teachers to teach reading. And then I have created an online membership community called the Reading Science Academy. And I know that you're familiar with that. And it's probably through that experience that I have really found the most joy. It is the most different thing for me. I've never done anything remotely like it. It has been incredibly challenging. And I don't always mean in a positive way. It's been really difficult for me because it's so unfamiliar to me. So it's an online subscription community that supports educators to learn about reading science and to bridge that research to practice gap, to help them know what's in the reading research and then support them to put it into practice in their schools and give them a community. So many of the educators I've encountered are sort of going it alone, and they don't know who to turn to for advice that they can trust, for knowledge that they can trust, or just for somebody that is going through the same journey that they're on. And so I wanted to create this space for people to learn and grow and do that together in a community. So it's been fantastic. It's just been, I'm beaming because I absolutely, all of these things that I'm involved in bring me so much joy. It has been an absolute pleasure. I think I'm at a point in my life, in my career, I've been in education for more than 30 years, where I really feel a sense of wanting to give back. It's not about me. I'm trying to support others. I'm trying to build future leaders. I'm trying to give people, like I said, the space and opportunity to learn so that they can support the children that they serve. I'm not in that role, and I want to support the people who are. So the sort of part that I've been reflecting on is how I got here for the last couple of years. I worked for 12 years in a position with an assessment company that I absolutely loved. I've had the pleasure, first of all, over my career to be able to say that about multiple jobs, that I just have been so fortunate professionally to have accidentally found the career path that I've had. And my past position was very much that way, that I loved the people I worked with. I loved what I was doing. I was, filled up by that experience. But at some point, I started to feel a little bit stale. Like I had sort of been there and done that, and I was starting to not feel challenged by it. I like to work at a pretty fast pace. I like to be involved in a lot of things, and I was feeling like I could phone it in. And I had ideas about how I might support educators, what things were needed out there in education. And my past employer was not the place where I was going to be doing those things. I had to travel quite a bit for that job. And my mother has frontotemporal dementia. She lives just about 10 minutes from me. She lives at home with my dad. And I was feeling a responsibility more and more to be involved in her care and to help them. And if I was traveling so much, I really just couldn't do that. And even though I was enjoying my work, I felt like I needed to make a change. It was just sort of time to make a change. I didn't know exactly what that meant. In fact, I didn't know at all what that meant. I just knew that I needed to step away from that and look for something else. And this was about a week, less than a week from the closures in the US due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
So I quit my job without a real plan, other than I thought, oh, I might consult somehow with districts. I might travel and do training like I had in some capacity. And then there was no traveling. There was no school. Everything, as everyone knows, changed at that moment. And I had to really do some soul searching and some quick scrambling to figure out, what is my place? What is my next step? How am I going to navigate my way through this? And I started to do something that I'm not very good at, which is listen to other people. So I started to really tune in and listen to teachers on social media, which was also new to me and not something that I was comfortable with. But, because of the pandemic and because of instruction going online, everybody was online. And so I started to listen to what teachers were saying. And I started to think about, what is it that they say they need? And what do I feel like my strengths are? And what do I have to offer? How can I serve in this moment? And that's what sort of birthed the idea of this Reading Science Academy. It was a little bit out of desperation, but also out of this need to give back and this need to serve, and being able to match what I thought my talents were with what I heard people saying that they need. And I think that's just the beautiful sweet spot that I've been able to, I feel a little choked up about it, because it's been so meaningful for me to be able to contribute to what educators are doing. It's such an important job. It is the most important job, and it's so desperately needed in the lives of children. That's why I'm an educator. Being in school impacted my life in amazing ways. And I really feel like it is the most important role that adults can play is being educators.
Thank you so much for, beautifully narrating where you were to the beginning of COVID, Stephanie. Like, I can only imagine the phenomenal changes people have gone through, their experiences, and how life shifted, flipped, whatever whatever capacity that change was in. One of my questions, and sort of quite a reflective one for you, is what was education, or like what got you into education, perhaps from a perspective of you as going through schooling and high schooling and the rest, and then transitioning to actually wanting to be within that field professionally.
Yeah. So, wow. So when I think about what made me go into education, it was my experiences in school.
Yeah.
Um, in elementary school, I had teachers, well, I'll just say I was extremely unhappy. I had a fantastic childhood. I had every advantage. Um, but personally myself, the way that I felt about myself, I had no confidence. Um, I was reluctant. I was shy. I was withdrawn. Um, I was sad. I felt alone. And I had teachers who encouraged me and who gave me opportunities that I didn't feel like I deserved,
Yeah.
but they saw something in me. Again, I'm going to get choked up. Um, they saw something in me that they thought was valuable. And I did not have a difficult time learning to read. I learned to read fairly easily. I had really good phonics instruction from that old SRA box that people my age will remember, that was kind of self-paced. And I really connected with that because I could move my way through it. And so reading became a refuge for me.
Yeah.
It became the way I learned and still do learn everything. I am a self-help junkie.
Yeah.
And what the teachers did for me in elementary school is they let me go to the library when I finished my work, when I completed the tasks. I felt it at the time, and I remember it so distinctly that this is the thing that I feel like really was the turning point for me in terms of my personality, my feeling of self-worth. It took me a long time to move past those negative feelings, but that was the beginning of it. In fourth, fifth grade, somewhere in there, sixth grade, that combination of being sort of pushed into leadership opportunities I didn't feel like I was worthy of, and then having time to read things that I would read about what you should do when you were shy, right? Like I would read about people who were confident, and I would read about how you can build confidence in yourself. And those things, it changed my life. In high school, I had one of those sort of leadership opportunities that got me interested in working in education. So as a career. There was a special education teacher who led a group of her students in conversation after school. It was not a counseling session, but just a chance to have conversation.
Yeah.
And I can't remember how I initially got connected with her exactly, but so I was not on an IEP, but it was a group for students on IEPs. But the common thread was we were struggling with something in our lives. We had family struggles. We had things that were interfering with our school work. And I think what she was trying to do was to show her students who had learning disabilities that there were people that this was a common thread. I'll say that. I was a straight A student. Like I said, I came from a very advantaged family. I was a cheerleader. I was in the school musical. Like I looked like I had it all going on. But internally, I was really suffering. And somehow she knew about that and included me in this group. And it was an extremely powerful experience. And it's what showed me that schools are the place to impact everyone. They are the place that can touch every life. Everybody goes to school of some sort. And that's what propelled me to go into education.
Wow. And it's so, like before I started recording this chapter, everyone has such a very personal journey of what led them to get into education. And yeah, and this is the thing, it's for me, I really do feel like it has a past chapter and a very strong connection
Yeah,
to experiences.
absolutely.
No,
Yeah, I went to college not as an education major.
yeah,
Um, I went as a psychology major because I was still very much in my head and trying to figure myself out, right? Like, um, very much interested in the mind and how the mind works and how thoughts work and how, uh, thoughts guide your life and your actions. And I was a psychology major, and one of the experiences was to do an observation in a local school. And I remember during that observation, it sort of solidified this belief that schools can change lives. And I thought, I want to go work in a high school because high school was so impactful for me. But I also had the sense that I can't be a teacher. Like I had so much respect for that profession, but I knew I didn't have it in me. I can't really put my finger on what that is,
yeah.
why that is. I'm not patient. I don't like people around me, like physically. I don't know exactly what it was that I observed in the classrooms that I thought, I want to be in education. I want to work in a school, but that being a classroom teacher is not really it for me. And I also, this is, sort of embarrassing to admit, but I grew up in the 70s, and that was a time, of the women's liberation movement. And you mentioned World Women's Day today, so maybe this is relevant. But I got a lot of messages about teaching as not being a profession that you wanted to aspire to. It was a default profession. That was something that was like rattling around. Nobody said that to me directly, but it was this sense that I got that I should, be a stockbroker, or I should be a welder, or I should be a brain surgeon, or that teaching was not a worthy enough profession. That's what women could do back before they had, their liberation, so to speak. But it's not something that somebody my age should aspire to do. Which is isn't that just awful to think about that?
It is, yeah.
It's a shame, really. And I don't know if other people my age felt that, experienced that, got that kind of subliminal message. But it was those two things. I didn't feel like I was equipped. My personality wasn't a match with being in the classroom, and it sort of was a message that I sensed, a bias that I shouldn't do that. And so I remember talking to one of my psychology professors in college about wanting to go in education but not wanting to be a teacher. And he said, "Oh, my sister is a school psychologist. You should look into that." And I had no idea what a school psychologist was. And he described it to me, and I thought, well, that's great. You're designing programs and experiences for students. You're addressing their academic needs, their mental health needs, but you're not in a classroom. You're not quite a counselor, but you're looking at schools as systems and trying to create them as healthy environments. And it was just an absolute fit and a match for me. And I said, well, do you know any programs? Where do I go to become a school psychologist? And he said, well, the best program in the country is at the University of Cincinnati. And Cincinnati happened to have been the town I was raised in, so that was perfect. And he went on to say, but it's the best program in the country and you'll never get in. You're not good enough. You're not a good enough student. Right?
Oh,
Right. Which was, my personality, that was the perfect thing to say, because I was like, really? I'll show you. And from that moment, I committed to making sure I got in. And I did, and it was the best. I would say maybe still is the best program in the country. And I had an amazing experience in graduate school, and it set me on the path to where I am today. I'm still using what I learned as a graduate student today, 30 years later. So
That's phenomenal. So you started off as a school psychologist.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about your journey. What happened from there?
Yeah. So I was a school psychologist in Head Start programs, so pre-K Head Start programs, 4 different centers, and a K-8 elementary school. And it was awkward to start. I felt too young to be in that job. I was insecure. I didn't know I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. But what I experienced was that almost every meeting I had with teachers and with parents had reading as a topic of conversation. So reading was not something I was interested in up to that point. I was, like I said, more interested in mental health issues. I was more interested in, the social and emotional well-being of students. And that was where I was going to sort of direct my career. But I had the experience in the Head Start settings of the power of how much growth children can make when you intervene early. And that just struck me, getting children on the right path. And in my K-8 setting, I had the experience of waiting to fail. That system was organized where you couldn't get help until you were far enough behind, because the only way to get help was special education. And to get special education help, you had to be far behind. That was the model. And everything had reading, even if it was, it looked like a behavior concern. The students often were struggling readers, older struggling readers who were trying to get attention, trying to find a way to fit in socially, and, misbehaving, acting up, getting into things that they shouldn't, in socially unacceptable but functional ways, because they couldn't read. They had academic problems. And that was what caused me to start focusing on reading. So those are the threads, I guess, of what got me to where I am.
Yeah. So Stephanie, tell us a little bit more about the link between reading our struggling readers and its impact on life as a student at school, in high school, and then sort of further moving into different phases of life. Why is reading so critical?
Yeah, well, I've already mentioned how critical it was for me. It was a lifeline for me personally. And then to be faced with students who couldn't read, where the system had really failed them. People take for granted, everybody assumes you go to school, you learn to read. Like, what are you there for? That's the primary thing that you're there for. And I was beginning to recognize that the educational system was failing children in that most essential endeavor and responsibility, that we weren't doing it. And I was shocked about that. Like I said, because my path was through psychology in undergrad, not through education. So it was my first eye-opening sort of experience. And reading is the gateway. It's the keystone skill that everything else rests upon. If you can't read, your opportunities are immediately limited, whether that is academically or socially. It just closes doors when you have difficulty with reading. And the reverse is true. If you can read, the possibilities are endless for you. Not that you have to enjoy reading, do it in your free time, read as much as I choose to, but you have to have that as a foundation. It has to be, it's essential. There's just there's really nowhere to go without it. And the cascade of what happens to kids when they can't read, the cascade of negative events, it's heartbreaking. And that's what I was observing, that if they were struggling readers, they understood that they were sort of not at the place everybody else was academically, but also socially. And what that did to kids' sense of self-worth and their self-esteem, how they viewed themselves, was so damaging. And we were doing it to them. That's what I just couldn't, our own failures as adults and as educators is what was causing that. It wasn't something internal to them. It wasn't something that could be prevented. It wasn't something that had to happen.
Yeah.
It just makes me angry still, because we're still doing it, unfortunately. It's the battle I've been fighting for 30 years. It's the reason I'm still doing exactly the same work in a slightly different form and flavor, but it's what drives me.
Absolutely. And Stephanie, personally for an adult working with students in a speech and language pathology capacity, I find for people working with children, at the end of the day, we want what's the best for the students' outcomes. We want them to thrive. So what is it that, or what are the multiple barriers where the breakdowns from adult to student?
Yeah. So it's the reading wars, right? Like this is what the breakdown is in, and this is where this is my future, and what I'm moving into is influencing higher ed, because I think that is where it starts and it's where it rests. That's the entity that bears the responsibility, I think, because the way that educators, teachers, administrators are trained and prepared related to reading is the system that we have failed in. Lots of misinformation is still perpetuated and promulgated out of universities into educators through their training programs. And again, it doesn't have to be that way. We know too much about reading, how it develops, what can go wrong, what to do when students struggle. We know too much to have this many struggling readers. And it starts with the way that we train educators, and we have failed miserably at that. So I've spent a lot of time up to now supporting teachers, and I'll continue to do that. But I'm trying to find ways now to support university professors, teacher trainers, adjunct professors in whatever capacity, to make that shift from whole language and balanced literacy approaches to direct and explicit structured literacy instruction, to what we know works. And there's a lot of parallels. So just like classroom teachers who just find out, this phrase, science of reading research, what is this? There are university professors who hear about it and they think, well, I don't know anything about that, and I should know something about that. And they take it upon themselves to start to learn. And that's the group of people that's my next chapter, so to speak. That's the group of people I want to support. They're out there, they're getting a lot of criticism, which is legitimate, but there's a group of people who want to do better. They want to have different information. They weren't trained with that information, but they are acknowledging their shortcomings and they want to learn and grow. And I'm very encouraged about that. And so that's who I'm trying to provide a little support and guidance to now.
That's amazing. And thank you for that. I wish you the absolute best in that particular endeavor.
Well, don't congratulate me too much, because I'm going with the willing, right? Like we tell teachers when they're trying to make a change in their district, start with the willing. I'm not reaching out to the most entrenched and resistant, folks. I'm starting with the willing.
No, and that's exactly right. And that's where change starts. And that's those ripple effects is where, yeah. So
Yep.
it can undermine that. My next question to you, Stephanie, was so you've said on multiple during multiple times in our conversation, your current work is bringing you joy. And describe that to us because I know joy, the word joy is associated with the word happiness and that sort of feeling, but also it has not a dark side to it, but it comes from that idea of despair and like a problem solving kind of things. Tell us more about that joy. What is it in the difficult times and what is it in the positive times?
Wow. So maybe it comes from what I was describing, um, as a young person having such a difficult time and those years of despair that that I've been able to overcome and work through. That that I personally have an outlook of positivity and optimism that I didn't have um, until late in my 20s. So I have such value for that, and I work so hard at that. And I feel so lucky to have that positivity and that comfort and that contentment with myself, I guess. And what makes me feel such joy in my work right now, I think, is, gosh, it's such a combination of what I feel like I can contribute and what I feel like is connecting with people. So I have this unbelievable opportunity to influence people that is so accidental and so unexpected. You're making me feel so emotional today. I'm not usually such a crier, but this is bringing up a lot of things I don't spend time thinking about. It's okay. It's just I don't reflect enough, I guess, on these things. So what I have experienced in the last 2 years is so unique and different to me. This virtual world, this conversation with you, this never would have happened. In my prior work, I would have never met you. I would have never had this encounter, and so many others. I have such a tremendous responsibility because of the way that people know me because of social media. And I'm not, I laugh, I always chuckle. And my two sons they do really laugh at me because I know nothing about social media. I know nothing, but I had to get a business off the ground, right? And so it was a means to an end. It is no longer a means, well, it's a means to a different end for me now. I'll say it that way. I started out with this is something I have to figure out because this is the way I promote a new business, right? So that was my understanding, and that's the way I approached it. And that is not what it is now, which is strange to say because I have not been a real proponent of social media. I've been very cautious. I'm a very private person. I'm not taking pictures of what I eat for lunch and sharing it. I'm not putting stuff out there about my personal life. But professionally, I've had, for me, what's been a very unique and meaningful experience, and also odd in this way, that people know me, but I don't know them. So outside of social media, I have relationships with people, real human relationships in real time and in person. And it's a two-way relationship, right? In social media, it's a one-way relationship. And people get to know things about me. They don't know me personally necessarily. They see all this and they, all this behind me and whatever. There are some personal things they ask about that. But because I'm out there doing videos and I'm putting out my writing, they get a glimpse of me, and they think that they know me, and this thing happens where they start to trust me, and I'm not sure that they should, but well, that's how I feel about it, I guess, that that if that's going to happen, that they're looking to me for guidance or advice or knowledge. I take that extremely carefully, and it's a huge responsibility.
Yes.
And I feel that. And with that huge responsibility has come the most amazing outpouring of appreciation from people. And, I think what might happen or could happen is that gives somebody a big head, or it makes you have some overinflated idea about yourself. But for me, it's just made me feel so cautious, and I want to get it right. I want to do right by people,
Yeah.
because what I say, they go and do. They take it to heart. They trust me to give it to them straight and to give it to them correctly. And I do my absolute best to make sure that happens. What I didn't expect is the appreciation that makes me think nobody else is doing this for educators. Not this specifically what I do, but nobody else is helping them. Like, I don't know, that if I'm helping them so much, which seems crazy, like I'm this random person who is just putting content out there, right? Like trying to be helpful, trying to share what I know that might be useful to somebody. And if they have that much appreciation for what this random person, stranger, is giving them, then it's filling a void. Like there is a void out there for educators that nobody is telling them they're doing a good job. Nobody is showing them how to improve their craft. Nobody is appreciating and respecting the work that they do. And I think they get that from me, because that is genuine to my core, that respect and appreciation. So it's this bizarre kind of dynamic. Does that make any sense? I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It is. And Stephanie, with that particular point, it's that research to practice gap, right? With research, and you've said that there's been an incredible amount of concrete research. We know, and people that know about that research, there isn't a reading war for them, because this is what works, right? And we know, but sort of, again, the breakdown is at a level of tertiary education, what is in the training, to then what's happening in the schools. And with that sort of going, oh, if it's that different, and here we're saying, no, but there is a very concrete path laid out.
Yes.
This is what we do. This is what the research is stating. But it's a gap. It's a significant global gap. It's not in one place. It's not in a few schools. It's a global gap. And that's where, and as a result, it's like you said before, you used the word cascade, and the cascading flow of implications.
Right. That's right.
And the number of people sort of wanting to assist educators and wanting to impart their knowledge in whatever way, shape, or form is, my question is that meeting, is that supply enough to meet the demand in that sort of business sense?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be. And in a business sense, I feel no competition with anybody who's doing the kinds of work that I'm doing, because there is so much of a need and so much demand to go around. No one business or approach can possibly meet it. It's sad that there's that much demand.
But also, have you found, so say through COVID, and we know the amount of information release that's happened, right? Like we've had webinars and we've had such generosity from people wanting to share their knowledge, and technology making this particular aspect possible, right?
Right.
There's been an overpouring of information and overpouring of learning, all of that happening, and people building their capacity, them wanting to go, that that idea of the heavy responsibility that you mentioned, I empathize with you to some respect, and going, no, we have a duty for our children,
That's
but
right.
within that duty lies heavy responsibilities, and we need to be able to be very mindful of where people are at, how to acknowledge grievances, how to acknowledge concerns, how to do that, but be gentle and compassionate at the same time. And that's an everyday learning. But have you found a shift in or through COVID, um, for more educators having access to information, having
Without a doubt.
upskilling, yeah, and then people again like yourself wanting to impart that knowledge with clarity. And that was the first thing I said to you before we started recording, is I came across one of your videos, and it was almost dot point information, and very clearly stated, and going, there was no ambiguity in it. So that to me just made sense. Yeah, what has been your experience with that, the shift in educators through?
Yeah, I think it's a silver lining of the COVID pandemic. It's definitely a silver lining. The access to information, the time that teachers had to go online and find information, and the willingness of people to give it away. It was kind of a perfect storm in a good way. And I think it has created a groundswell of interest in reading research, and interest in the topic of reading in general, you know, from journalists and documentaries and parent advocacy, all kind of happening at the same time, to come together in a way that in my 30-year career, I've never seen. I've seen top-down efforts
Yeah.
within the US to legislate, to mandate, to incentivize from the top these kinds of changes, exactly the same practices that we're trying to get implemented now. And it didn't work, it didn't stick. So I think what we're having now is a groundswell, it's a bottom up, it's a teacher to teacher, parent to parent, parent to teacher kind of networking that's happening. And I think, you know, the internet and social media is a huge positive component to that. It's a factor to that. And it's something that we didn't have in those past initiatives and efforts. And I think it's what's going to put us over the edge to maybe finally getting this right for kids. I'm hopeful.
Yes, and that's the thing. And very many people that I've had conversations with, that lining or that element of hope is so transparent. And it's as a result of this information, the sharing, people wanting to go and try, people acknowledging that there was something that wasn't quite right, and actually starting to voice that now. Is that,
That's the thing.
yeah, is that something? Tell us a little bit about your practice, or your business, and when you said educators were coming to you and you had to listen to them, was there a common thread?
Yeah, you just hit on one of the very common threads of the people who I interact with. They had this experience and this feeling. Well, they had the experience that they were not meeting the needs of their students. Everybody goes into education, as you've said, to do the best, to create that optimal life for students, to give them those opportunities. That's why we become educators. But they had the experience of not being effective at that, which is demoralizing, right? It's just, it's what I think causes teachers to leave the profession, is that their heart is in the right place, but their mind doesn't have the skills. They were not prepared with the skills to actually operationalize that education being the way to change lives, and specifically around reading. So they had the experience that they were not effective reading teachers. And in the back of their mind, they were thinking, there has to be some other way. There's gotta be, I'm doing the best I can with what I know. I'm doing what my administrators are telling me. I'm, doing the best I can with what everybody around me, other teachers are doing. And it's just still not working. There's gotta be a better way. So that is a very, very common, sadly to say, a very, very common experience that people bring to me and tell me about.
Absolutely. And what are some of the sort of interactions you've had with educators where you've been able to go, these are some practical things that could happen, whether it's a practical thing in the form of learning or applying to practice, if we want to say that, or how, measuring change or any of that. Is that something you can share with us?
Yeah, well, that's part of the joy, I guess, is that when I have shared through writing or through videos what I know to be effective, what I have experienced to be effective, what I've observed to be effective, people try it and it seems to work. And that's what I feel so excited about. That's what brings me joy. People write to me, they message me. I went to a professional conference last month. They stopped me in the hall, even with a mask on. Somehow it was the hair, I kept saying, that they recognized, or maybe the eyes, I don't know. They would stop me in the hall and say just the most amazing things. Like, I read this email that you wrote and it really made me think. And I got that book that you suggested, and I talked to my building administrator, and now we're doing XYZ. I mean, I have thousands of those stories, literally thousands of those stories that just make me feel like, even though I cannot be a classroom teacher, I can't have that impact on individual children, I can impact the people who do.
Yes.
And gosh, I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than that. I feel like I'm contributing. I feel like I have something to offer. That it gets me up in the morning. Absolutely. It's tremendous. It's been absolutely a joy. That's all I say about it.
That's amazing. And it's the ripple effect, right?
Yes.
Educators to students to wherever that ripple is going to make its way.
Yes. So here's a ripple for you that since you use that word. So here's a cascade of a series of just mind-blowing events. So one of my favorite books is called Emotional Agility. I don't know if you know this book by Susan David. And in her book, and she has, I think, a TED Talk, and she's done many podcasts. It's a fantastic book. It's one that is like it's a sacred book to me because it guides my life. She talks about this this word. Oh gosh, now I'm going to butcher it. Now I've started out on the story and I'm not going to remember it exactly. The word is Sawabona, and it's it might be a Zulu word, it might be a Swahili word. Oh, terrible that I can't remember it. Sawabona. It means I see you, and by seeing you, I acknowledge you, and I bring you to life. It's a greeting in African language that I can't quite recall, that I just think is so beautiful. This idea of acknowledging people, recognizing them, truly seeing them. Yes. And I wrote about it in an email. So I used that term to acknowledge teachers at the beginning of the pandemic. Like, I see you. I literally see what you're doing. I see the nights that you're awake learning, the nights that you're up Instead of being with your family and your dogs, you are creating new lesson plans. You're going back to school to learn the reading science. I see the incredible measures that you're taking on behalf of your students. I acknowledge you. I respect what you're doing. And one of the people who read that email, she told me months and months later, she took that to heart, that message. And she started a campaign in her school where she was recognizing, like this, it was not an award exactly, but she was recognizing the educators in her building with Sawabona. She was communicating to them, I see you, I acknowledge you, I bring you into being with this beautiful expression, and I see the work that you're doing. And how much that was creating a positive culture in this extremely difficult time for teachers, extremely difficult, creating a positive mood within her school. And then right before the holiday break, she sent me a picture. A child in her school had written the word Sawabona on a note to her and left it on her desk.
Oh,
Say, I see you who have created this in our school. So what a ripple, right? Like,
wow, that's
isn't
amazing.
that amazing?
Yes.
That to me, that's the purpose. That's what we're here to get up for and do every day, is to serve other people in that way, to create those experiences that allow them to have that positive experience in their life.
Absolutely. And you know, the other thing I'm reflecting on is what connects with us and how we share it with people may be something totally like they might connect to it very differently given in time and space that they are. But
unpredictable ways that you could never imagine.
exactly. And it's so personal to everyone. But at the same time, there are all these different varied connection points. And yeah,
it's what you're doing with human chapters, right? It's what you're promoting, those connections across people who seem so different and have different stories at the surface, but there's something
exactly
internal that connects us deeply.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having this conversation, Stephanie, and actually getting to know you.
It's fun to get to know you too, even though we could not be farther away geographically, right? Yeah, but we have such a connection in many ways, and it's been a delight to talk with you. I really do appreciate what you've brought out of me, what you've caused me to think about and reflect on, because I am on this sort of journey with my career, and it's important for me to be grounded in why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I very much appreciate this conversation.
That's my absolute pleasure. And we will be wrapping up as well. But have I covered things that you've wanted to talk about, Stephanie? Has there been any questions I haven't asked or even thought to?
You covered things I didn't want to talk about or didn't know I wanted to talk about. How about that? So that's a good. You're good at what you do. No, I don't think there's anything else. Yeah, I think I've touched on what I was wanting to share. So, yeah.
Any 3 to 5, less than that, that's all right. But key takeaways for anyone listening to this conversation. We may have educators, we may have parents, we may have people interested in conversation. It doesn't, that you would like
to. So since we've been talking about my professional journey and sort of where I am in my career, I'll share some words of wisdom that hang on my wall right here that got me out of my fear and despair when I quit my job and the pandemic hit and I panicked. I came across this quote by Arthur Ashe, who is a famous tennis player, and I play tennis, keeps me very humble. But his quote is what propelled me to move forward. And so maybe these words can be inspirational to other folks, it's start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And for me, start where you are, start first of all was important. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Don't think you have to be somewhere or something that you're not. Get in touch with where you are. That's what I tried to do. What was I feeling? What was I experiencing? And what did I have to offer? Use what you have, right? I had to really think deeply about my strengths, my knowledge, what I could contribute, and then do what you can. Don't get lost in your despair. Don't sit and spin with the what ifs and woulda, coulda, shouldas, but just start and do and move forward with even a small step, whatever you can manage with where you are and what you have. So those are words that guided me in this recent part of my career. And so I'll share those with your listeners.
Beautiful. Thank you very, very much, Stephanie. And I'm going to put Reading Science Academy, and we will tag Stephanie Stollar Consulting as a part of this conversation. If there is any other video, and I will actually tag the video I first came across as well.
I'd love to know which one it was. Yeah.
Yes. And it would have been, yeah, actually, that's a good question. I'll have to go back to try and find out, because I've watched quite a few since then. Right. So yeah, to see which one was one of your first ones. And right. It was a 3-minute video.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. That. Beautiful. And yes, and people will be able to find you. Thank you for taking the time and spending the energy on this conversation. I deeply appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much.
No worries. And anyone that's listening to this conversation, if you think it's going to connect with anyone else, please feel free to share it. It's going to be available on Facebook, YouTube, and Human Chapters podcast. Awesome. Thanks, guys.